Let's embark on a mythical, fantastical journey to, bizarro world and entertain the idea that big money will be spent on a big bat. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Pirates. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or hockey, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins in the same place that you found this. The free agency list, or lists if you want to pluralize it, at both right field and first base aren't exactly overwhelming. So let's start there and keep this as fair as possible to Ben Cherington and staff. I don't look over those and say, wow, there's this guy right here. You gotta go get him. You have to. And I also don't look at them, obviously, from the Juan Soto perspective. There's only a handful of teams in the majors that play the sport at that payroll level. So my skepticism on this subject is rooted not only in who would be searching for a bat, meaning that Cherington can't recognize hitting to save his life, but also the cost and also the field. But again, just to play along with the concept here, because one of the things that does come up from time to time among the people who cover baseball, but they cover it mostly from the player personnel standpoint as opposed to the games and that sort of thing. It's not team specific, their coverage. Those types keep associating the Pirates with, well, they just might go and get a big bat. Jim Bowden, who used to be a general manager in the Bigs, was recently quoted as saying, I think the Pirates might go and get a big bat. And anytime that happens, the people who follow the team really, really closely go, ooh, okay, well, who? I've gone through these lists, and the one name that pops up out of any of them, and doesn't even pop up that much, is Tyler O'Neill. And if that sounds familiar, that's because he was with the Cardinals for a few years, so the Pirates got to face him head on. And he just finished up with the Red Sox. Now, he's a guy who's got some pop. He had 31 home runs this past season. You would almost take 31 home runs unconditionally in Pittsburgh because of the dearth of home runs here. And he batted .248, which isn't great, although all of that stuff is now getting skewed down. And he's had an .840 or .850 OPS, which is nice. He was at .847 this past season. And according to one website that's for a long time been doing estimates for what players could get or are likely to get on the open market, O'Neill's figure is 3 years and $42 million. Now, considering that O'Neill hasn't yet turned 30, and that figure is actually a little bit low for someone who just hit 31 home runs, you got to wonder, wait a second, what's wrong here? It sure isn't his defense. This was a 2-time Gold Glover while he was in St. Louis. And that's when you have to thumb over all the way to the left of his ledger to see that he has missed a lot of baseball. I'm going to read you his games played figures from 2018 to 2024. I'm going to read them in order. You ready? 61, 60, 50, 138, 96, 72, 113. Now, the 113 was obviously this past season, and 113 sounds high compared to the rest of them, but it's not very high for someone you'd want in an everyday position, and who's not a platoon guy per his splits. He's supposed to be out there. The reason he's not out there is that he's always hurt. And baseball, maybe more than any other sport, prioritizes participation. You got to be out there. That's a big, big chunk of your value. Part of what makes Brian Reynolds, a big part of what makes Brian Reynolds as valuable as he is that he's just out there. He's always there. And out of all these years that I read off, there was really only one, 2021 with the Cardinals, where he played the 138 games. And you say, all right, he's never logged 500 at-bats in a season. I'm going to read you the at-bats now. 130, 141, 139, 482, that was in the obvious 2021 season, 334, 238, 411. Now, you would be paying what would constitute a pretty significant full-time rate for someone who's very likely, and I mean very likely, to be a part-time player for you. In fact, if you were to give O'Neill the money that is projected for him, that 3 years and $42 million, the only guy on the roster who'd be making more, this roster, would be Mitch Keller. So is that exciting? I don't know. To me, the healthiest path toward getting real live offense into Pittsburgh would be to have a general manager who can recognize hitting and thus could trade some of the young pitching for the hitting. I just don't want this guy doing that. When we come back, J1Q.
It's Gun Storage Check Week. Help prevent unwanted access to your firearms. No one wants their unsecured gun to be used in an accident, a suicide, or a crime. Use lockboxes, safes, and locks to secure your firearms. Learn more at gunstoragecheck.org. That's gunstoragecheck.org. Brought to you by NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association.
Abandoned ship, Bob. Sell the team. Are you a Pirates fan who is angry or apathetic about our perennial losing baseball team? Do you feel helpless because you don't know how to make a difference? Well, good news. We have something you can do about it. Join our Sell the Team movement. We're a group of passionate fans voicing our frustration and demanding change through billboard campaigns, press outreach, protests, and involvement at local city government meetings. Go to ourteamnothis.com to get involved.
Today's J1Q comes from Anson, who, in reference to yesterday's show about losing Aroldis Chapman, says, no doubt Chapman is valuable. If the Pirates had been able to grow some position players, they could have kept Chapman. And isn't that just another example of how badly Ben Cherington has done running things? Yeah. And I love it. I love it when listeners of this program attack causes rather than symptoms. And that's what this is. That's what this discussion is. You should be able to bolster a very real, very visible shortcoming on your roster by spending money, regardless of your payroll size, provided you can get yourself enough core talent as a foundation. And that's the problem here. That's been the problem here. Half a decade later, the best players on this roster, with the exception of the one who fell from the sky thanks to the baseball gods, are players that were acquired by Neil Huntington, or one player who was acquired by Dave Littlefield. So what ends up happening is you take the fourth worst bullpen in the majors this past season, and you allow to walk away the single best pitcher out of that pen so that you can reallocate that money toward hitting. Anyone will tell you, routine baseball roster construction sees your starting pitching addressed internally, your hitting addressed internally, and everything else addressed through the open market. And that's really been true of the bullpen, even in Pittsburgh, for years and years now. But they can't do that, even with $30 million plus to spend this offseason. They can't do that. Why? Because as I just laid out for you, it would probably take half of that to bring in a legitimately flawed player like Tyler O'Neill. And then from there, you do have to fill out the rest of the pen because David Bednar gets himself a big raise through arbitration, up to $6 million. And he's a question mark out there. And all of it stems from the internal failure, and ongoing failure at that. It's not like there's anybody who was on the 2024 Indianapolis roster who's banging down the door to get here. Termarr Johnson is the next hitter type that anybody could reasonably be looking forward to, and he's 2 levels off. And he, of course, has had some of his own issues in the minors. That's not okay. That's not okay. That is the actual problem. Being around for 5 years and only having Nick Gonzalez to show for that. That is the problem. Because it wasn't just the draft that they could have utilized for this. Draft picks take a while. The draft is a crapshoot. But you also made a ton of trades, a ton of them, of real live players with real live value to get prospects back. And none of them, not one of them, 0 can hit. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. Going to do another one of these tomorrow.